So to begin, this app is going to need to do some HTTP requests, and I don't want to make an XHR object every time. So what is the package I'm installing? Axios. And then I'll npm start. So this will just boot up when it's ready. Oh, wait, maybe it won't. Is this one still running? Nope. Great. Still works. Go. All right, so I'm going to be doing a GET request to get my to-dos for the page load. This is our first method for this. So I want to set up this functionality. Where would I start? I have a couple things I need to add to this app.js file. So I know for sure I'm going to have to save my data when I get it from my request. So I'm going to start off by making a place and state for it. I'm going to say expect some to-dos, todos, and starts off empty, but we'll fill it in as soon as the request comes back. Now, Moroni, what is the lifecycle method I use for a GET request once the page is loaded? Component did mount. It did mount. It is ready to get your data. Elizabeth, how do I set up the GET request? Phone a friend. Which friend Eric would like to answer? Ooh, and it uppercased it for me. You're right, I just forgot to import Axios, so it's trying to do it for me. But yes, Axios.get. Okay, so I'll grab the URL that we have here. And it will come back with two possibilities, and what are those? .then, and what's the thing that gets the error? It catches an error. So here we get a response, which I've been hyphenating as res, and here we'll catch an error, which I've been hyphenating as error. It's an error. Console.console error. And what is the best thing to do first when the response comes back? Console log it, especially if you have not tested this API in Postman. Now, work on your API project, you definitely want to post or check it out in Postman to see if you can use it, get an idea of how to use their data. We've used this one enough though, so we'll just test it here. And app.js line 15, the request is going out. What are we getting back? We're getting a response.data with our data and a bunch of other stuff if we want it, but we don't need it. So instead of console logging, I'm going to open this up. And how do I save this data in state, Charles? Set state. Awesome. Cool, cool. And yeah, that will do our GET request. Now, if I want to console log and see what my state looks like, where in a class component can I console log? I want to make sure this is being saved. So I want to console log this.state.todos, but where can I write a console log and the class component will let me do it? I could do it in here. Okay, so actually this brings up a good point we haven't covered. Let's look at this. Let's console log this.state.todos right here. Right, we're saying set state and then console log it. However, oh dang it, it worked. Wow, I'm actually surprised. Why am I surprised? Something we haven't covered is set state is asynchronous. So many times, if you write a console log to see your state right after set state, most of the time we would still see this, an empty array. Because React doesn't do this immediately. It has a moment in time where it does it appropriately, and it will actually batch set states together. So if we're doing multiple, some may be postponed so that it can do it all at once. To us, it's still, you know, a blip in time, but to the computer, it's really waiting around to do it.
Doesn't it usually wait till render to set?
Well, set state, we'll go save it, and then render is called so that we can see the new data that's in state. So that's the order. This is what will trigger a render to occur. So usually when you console log, you'll do it right here. And this is nice. If you do it right here, the first time it console logs, you'll see an empty array. The second time it console logs, you'll see a full array. So you're like, hey, it's working. The page loads, it's empty. It goes and gets the data, refreshes, and it's full. Now, set state's asynchronous. This is working, and I'm a little upset about it. But typically, what you'd have to do, the set state can take a second argument, something we haven't seen before. After the object, if we need something to happen only once this is done, we can provide an anonymous callback method here and say once it's done, do some operation or console log what it looks like in state. And this will always give you a snapshot of it once the set state is complete because set state's asynchronous. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you'll want to console log right after a set state and it won't show you the data. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that set state hasn't occurred yet. It looks like it has. So as a second argument, we can provide a little callback function to make it show up. But we don't need it right now. We're good. Everything's good. And now you know everything about set state. It has prev state, an optional function at the beginning, and it has an optional second argument to have some operation done once the set state is complete. That is all of set state. Okay, component did mount. We're getting our data. I would now like to list my data out, and we're just going to keep it all right here for simplicity because context is hard enough. So I would like to map out a div that has the title and description in it. Eric, you're just lucky today. Can you help me map this out? It's a tall order. I'll start us. Mapped to-dos equals. What are we mapping first and foremost? Cool, so we have to reference what object it's in. So we'll grab this.state.todos and we will map it. And it will give us each to-do. But what do we want to return? I'm not going to make a new component again for simplicity, but I want to return a div with the title and description in it. So how would that look JSX-wise right here? You've got lifelines. He looks around. No one's looking back here. Somebody help. It will, but I need to put them in elements first. So we're gonna make a div first. Now I'd like a title to be in maybe an H3. How do I get the title to be in here? Let's just see what happens. Oh, bummer. Oh, good. We missed something. Now we're good. Okay. By beat. Never going to remove that one. All right, and I'd also like the description in a p tag. Cool. I'm missing one more thing my map wants. Key. What element gets the key? The div, the one that I didn't click on. Key equals. And what's a good thing to make the key? We could use an I, but we have something better. Yeah. And underscore ID. Now IDs will vary on their syntax. Sometimes it will be .id, sometimes it will be .underscore ID, sometimes it will be .uppercase ID. It depends on the database you're using because databases give your data IDs when you save them. This is what MongoDB does. So for the rest of the course, when we're building our own databases, APIs, and servers, everything we're using, their IDs will always be underscore ID. So it's good just to get used to that if you're using MongoDB. If you're using something like SQL, it's just .id, but not much of a difference there. Okay, we're getting everything to show up just so we can see it a bit better before we continue. I'm going to put a border around each one. And I know I do a lot of this inline, but it's because it's quick. When you're developing these out, you definitely want to stick it in a CSS sheet with the class name, unless, why would I use an inline style tag?
It's like using a variable.
Yeah, if it's determined by a variable. So background image is a great one because I have to-do.image URL. I don't have access to that in CSS. So I'd add that as an inline style, but then I'd give this div a class name for the rest of the styling. I want to keep this clean. And that's if you're using CSS sheets. Okay, we have our get request. Hurrah. It's time to learn context again. So we're thinking global state and global functionality, something that multiple parts of my site may need or have access to. What inside of my app component right now, both data and functionality wise, might need to be shared? The data for sure, so to-dos. What else? Yeah, not the method itself. That's something with the component, but what the method is doing. I may have multiple parts of my site that needs to be able to get to-dos. So we're gonna move this and this to context and then keep going from there with the post request. So the fun part, context. We're gonna make a good folder structure here. So what's a good folder to be named for my context? Makes sense. We'll put a file in that and it's going to be providing to-dos. So what would I conventionally call this component? To-do provider. To-do provider. So everything you make component-wise that are context-based, we call them providers because they will be using a context component to provide data. Port React and component from React. Now, when we're working with context, who recalls the method from React we have to use to create a context? Yes. So I'm going to make a variable up top and call it, what would I call the context for my to-dos? That makes sense, to-do context. And we're going to be using the to-do context with this to-do provider we created so that our component we're making will be able to provide context. All right, we're just putting these two Lego pieces together. Without context, this is just a regular class. And without a class, context can only provide data, but it can't change the data over time. It's just like, here's your string. It'll always be this way. But if we use a class with it, we can provide data that we can change over time. And that's where this really gets powerful. It's mixing these two together. So that is equal to react.create context. What does my to-do provider return? It does return a provider. What holds my provider component right now? And don't get mixed up. This is not a provider component yet. It hasn't been taught how to provide. There's a piece of to-do context that teaches that does that. Yeah, we return the to-do context provider component. And it has an opening and closing tag because we're going to wrap it around another component. Where are we going to put this component once it's done? Yeah, we're going to go to index and we're going to wrap it around app. So we need to make sure it knows that it has children, it has things it needs to return and have show up. So what is the placeholder text here I put so React knows you will be wrapped around something? This.props.children. Now, if this was a functional component, not a class, how would I write this? Props.children. So it exists in every component. It's a prop you don't have to pass. React just knows about it. And if you use it, it means whatever this component is, it's going to be wrapped around some children. It's going to return additional data. All right, there's one prop our provider needs, and this teaches it what to provide. The value. And what data type does value need to be? An object. Okay, so we're ready to go with our setup here. Now, sometimes this is a really hard error to spot. Why is value white?
Because it's the property of data.
it's a property of this, but I'm closing the tag here. And this happens all the time when you're adding this prop because we're putting on different lines. But this is the closing caret for this opening one. We don't want to close it here. And now it's like, okay, right color. Just common issue I see quite often. All right, well, let's go put this where it needs to go. So we said index.js, let's import it. Import to-do provider from the, where do I get to it? Do I just say to-do provider? No, it's in a context folder. Now it knows where it is. We'll wrap it around the app. And we get our app sandwich. Okay, from this point, our provider is basically set up. Now it just needs the data and the methods it needs to provide to the app. And then we'll build a little consumer higher order function so that whatever component needs to use this data can by using our little function. So what again from app.js did we say we need to pull out and move to context? The request and state. So let's take to-dos out. And with that gone, we'll just get rid of that and go to our to-do provider and say, no, you're going to be keeping track of this. And now where do I need to reference this so that it's actually provided to my app? Here. I need to add it to the value object that the provider is providing. So I'll say you're going to provide something called to-dos, and that is referencing this.state.todos. That is this data here, but here's your reference to it if you need to use it. Okay, the second thing was the functionality. So we'll take this Axios get request out. But where do I put the get request in here? Do I use lifecycle methods in context? Oh, I don't think I've ever said no, but why would you say no? That's right. We're not going to use lifecycle methods in context. I've yet to see it. There might be a reason, but very rarely. So I have my request there. How do I make this not error out? It doesn't like any of this.
Well, if you don't have a life, like for example, if you don't have a lifecycle method here, how are you going to get the Axios request to run on the page?
Oh, we'll get there. We are literally a few steps away. But first, yeah, let's write my own method. So what would be a good method name for what this is doing? Yeah, what are we getting? To-dos. So let's make a method called getTodos that gets our to-dos. Now it's happy with us. And we can provide that as well to our app. We'll say you're going to provide something called getTodos, which is this method, this.getTodos. So we're providing the data and the ability to get the data. That is being provided. You see where I'm going, Martin?
All right, well, I mean, if you only have this component.
All right, we'll get there. But now we need to be able to consume. We want our app.js to be able to still map through to-dos and all that. So the hardest part, I think, is building this consumer component. It's not a whole lot of code. It's just confusing looking. So what would I call this method, or this function, sorry, this higher order function? There's a conventional name we'll give it. Starts off with a certain word. Starts with to-dos. Yeah, sure, with to-dos. Is a function that takes in what as a primary argument? It does take a function, but in React, what do we call functions? Component. So it takes a component, and that function returns a function that takes in what? Props, because all components should be able to take props, so we're making sure that is maintained here. And when this function is called later down the road, what does it return? The consumer. So the to-do context dot consumer, right? So we get a dot provider and a dot consumer with every context variable we make, and they're sibling. One thing provides, the other one says, I needed the data from what this is providing. So it's providing this value. The consumer gives us access to this object, but in what form? Value. Oh, that's hard to know what that is though if we just write value. What if I added this to it? We didn't write it this way before. This pre-ES6. But what it does, consumer gives you a callback function. So we could also say value fat arrow. It's kind of like the event object, right? We click a button and the function that gets called automatically receives an event object. When we use a context consumer, it calls a function that automatically gives us the value from its provider so that we can return our component, whatever we passed in, with everything from that value object and with everything from possible props we're passing in. Woof. So what will this be once we actually use it? App. So it's saying take an app and return a function called app that can still take props later on because all components need to be able to take props. And then return my app component with everything from my provider value and also everything from props I may have passed it manually. But we're using a placeholder, so we could use this on as many components as we need, but we need access to this on every file, so what do I need to write for const? Export. Can I say export default? Why? You can only have one default export per file. You can have as many exports as you want. Export default means it is the default, just import it as its pure name. Then if you use export, you can do as many of these as you want, and what it does is it builds an export object that will have a with to-dos from, with to-dos. So we're going to be having this object, and we need to pull this out of it with object destructuring. So in app.js, I can import it. I can say import destructure with to-dos from my context to-do provider. All right, so that's the difference. That's why we need to use brackets. It's an export object if it's not the default. So we need to say from the object, what do we want? Because again, we can have as many exports as we want per file, but only one export default. Not at all. And actually, we don't even have to write it here. I can come up here and say export default class. That'll work the same way.
So what is the export object? Like for example, for this component, what does the export object contain? Does it contain the default and this other export?
No, just this. Yep.
So only exports that are exported like that are included in the export object?
Yep, and then this is like the pure name. It's like, this is the most important thing from this file. You can pull it in by its name. This might be a little helper function. A lot of the times you may not even use export default. If you make a file of just a bunch of helper functions, they'll just all be exports and then you can import them. Let's say we had like 5 methods that we needed from that file. We'd say, give me with to-dos, then the other method, and then the other method, and the other method. And then we could use all those as imports. But those don't exist. We just have with to-dos. Now, where do I use this method in order for my app to get that data from the provider? It's already being provided. How do I consume? I need to use this somewhere to consume. Export default my app with to-dos. And it reads a little bit like English, right? Export my app with to-dos, with the data it needs to function. This function will be called and it's going to pass our app into it. So we go over to where the function is, it receives app and returns a function that can still take in props. So I can still pass props to my app later if I need to. But it returns my app component with everything from the value object. So now it's receiving this and any other props I may send it later. So then we come back to here. With to-dos, this evaluates to a new app component, but this app component's different than the one that we see here. It has all the data in it now, and then that's exported, so it's used with all those props attached. Where do I get the data from this though? How do I reference, for example, to-dos? It's no longer this.state.todos. props. This dot props dot to do. So when we're using this consumer, everything from that value object in our provider is thrown into the component's props. It's saying Axios is not defined. Where is it saying that at? Yes, we're not using it here anymore. As you can see, Node is even making it dimmed out to show that we're not using it. So we'll go to the to-do provider and we'll import it. Well, our to-dos aren't showing up because our method is here, but we're not calling it. So where were we calling it when, or where were we doing our Axios request for page load? Can we still do it here? How would I do it here? Close. Oh, it fixed it for me, dang it. Yeah, this.props.get to-dos. And our to-dos are back. So I'm still using my component did mount in app.js. I'm not using component did mount in my provider because this is gonna mount first and then the app. And so I don't want any requests to go out here. I'm gonna provide the ability to do requests here. And then I'm gonna give it to my app so it can call it at the appropriate time or any of its children components. So app is still saying get to-dos on component did mount, which comes over the provider, does the request, saves it in state, which causes a re-render. Re-render renders the to-do provider, which is wrapped around our app, which re-renders the app, which now sees we have to-dos, maps it out, and makes it show up. But for us, it's a split second. Ooh.
Does that apply to your app?
Yes, because I needed a lifecycle method. If I didn't want to do this on page load, if I wanted to click a button, then there's no reason for app to be a class component at that point. Now I'm keeping it as a class as well because we're going to do the post request now. But any questions starting off with this setup or any files we need to look over and talk about? Feeling good? It's just like it's in there. To see what it looks like right now. Yeah. Yeah, what is the first thing that loads in this entire application right now? So I guess, yeah, this is the first thing being called in our application, but which two of these functions are being called first? To-do provider, it's the first function on the list. It's still order of operations. So this is being called and it loads all of this data. Nothing's being called. It's just loading it all. And then we return the provider component wrapped around a child. And it's at that point, once it gets to this line, that it goes and loads the app component. The app component reads down. It calls its initial render, but there are no to-dos. And then component did mount fires and gets to-dos, which brings us back here. It gets the to-dos, it updates state, causing this re-render, which re-renders our whole app, which causes the map to occur again. But now there is data, so it shows up. It's like a big circle. Huh? Why did we do this in the first place? Because let's think about this. Let's say we used app as our global state. So what we would have is our, I'm gonna erase all this, but let's say we have get to-dos, we have, wrong button, close. We have get to-dos, we have, eventually we'll have an add to-do, we'll have a delete to-do, we'll have a update to-dos. And just with those four methods, this file is getting long, and we'd also have constructor, super, and this dot state with our to-dos. Okay, so we'd have that by default just to get the to-dos working, but then in here, we wouldn't just be mapping to-dos, we would have a switch, spelled correctly, with a bunch of routes and we'd have a nav bar, and we'd maybe have a footer. And that's just to get the to-dos to working, but maybe this is a website that has logging in and signing up, so we need more methods. We have login, and we have sign up. I know this is getting very long, but trying to prove a point. So with login and sign up, we'll also need a log out. And what is happening to our app component? It's a monstrosity. And especially now, okay, this is just to get this set up, but now we need to add to-dos. So with the method add to-dos, we need to add inputs for all the form, which means what other two methods am I going to be creating in here if I have a form? Handle change and handle submit. So I scroll down the list. I'm like, okay, let's add a handle change. So this is where state management tools become essential. Because what we're seeing right here, while it's the most complex thing we've seen so far, it's still a very simple app. I'm sorry to say. It has all the CRUD operations, so it is very complex. But if you're looking at big applications made by teams of people, this is a bite-sized piece of one file. Like, it is so much code that goes into these things. So if we had app.js controlling our state for our entire application, it turns into a monster. Where if something breaks, it's all about let's scroll up and down and find it. Then, you know, let's scroll up and down our routes. To where if we were able to put all of this into their own file and then just reference it where we need it, such a more pleasant experience. We're back. So that's why we're using context. Our functionality and our state is going to get big. And to make it easier for us to handle, we're going to compartmentalize it. So this does not change how our app functions. It's just saying, put my functionality and state in another file, and then I will use this function whenever I need to use data from this file. And it's React's way of doing this. There's other packages, there's MobX, there's Redux that do similar things for all sorts of frameworks. This is React's way, and it's pretty cool because we just get to use class components for it. And if you've heard of React hooks, has anyone heard of React hooks? Yeah, it's a new feature in React. We're super cool. In fact, you don't even have to really use class components anymore if you don't want to, if you're using hooks. They're not going away though, so we have to learn them. Where this file would turn into maybe like 10 lines of code if we're using hooks. Yeah, I'll do a little lesson later on, but we got to get classes down because hooks just does all this for you in the background. So it's another layer of declarative code on top of this already very declarative code. And if we don't know what's happening in the background, hooks are really easy to break and they're really frustrating if you don't know what's going on. But yeah, we will definitely go over hooks in time. Yeah, so our get request is over in context. Well, now I want to add the ability to add a to-do. So my question is, do I want to maintain the state for my form in my context? Do I want to put, you know, all the inputs here? Do I want my handle change here and my handle submit here in context? Yes or no, and why? No is the right answer. Cool. So no, we don't want to put those in here. How much of our application will need access to that handle change and handle submit? One component. That does not sound global to me. That sounds private. So that is a private state. So I could either make a form component with its own state, or I could keep, you know, app as a class, and its purpose is to maintain this form. So we'll just do that to keep this simple. We would probably break this into more pieces. But we are going to have state and app as well. And this is confusing at first. I'm managing two pieces of state. So we just got to make sure this state is local. It's only for maybe one component. But this state is for everything. And this is for everything in case it needs it. So we're going to list out all the to-dos. We'll put them in their own div just to make this a little bit better. And I'm going to build a form. So what do I need to build a form? I need a form. That's a good start. And we're going to do title and description. So 2 inputs. I wonder if this will work. Yes. If you're, does anyone use tab to auto create their tags? You know, you write the word like, you just say button and hit tab and it creates it for you. This doesn't work unless you tell your IDE that you're working in React. So you can click down here, it'll probably just say JavaScript. Type in the word React, click JavaScript React, and now it knows. And if you'll have to do that on every file, it's super annoying. So if you don't want to do it on every file, then go to extensions and get Babel React, Sublime Babel. There we go. Sublime Babel. And it will figure out off of your file what file extension it is and just automatically set it to that. So I'm going to install it now as well because I don't want to keep pressing that button. It's awful. Cool, and now it should automatically know I'm in Babel or I'm in React. Like I didn't have to change this file, but it knows I'm using React. So Sublime Babel is the name of the package, and then you'll be able to use your tab autocompletes per normal. So that is Sublime Babel. Makes it so you can tab for auto completing. Completion. Yeah, that's a better word. Back to the task at hand, post request. We'll say add to do. And we'll put all the props on here just so it's ready. We'll give both inputs the name, the value, on change, and the placeholder for good user experience. Title, this.state.title, description. Stop me if any of this needs to be reviewed. If you're like, wait, I forgot how to make a form. We get our two handle changes. Our handle submit. And the placeholders. Okay, form is set up. Of course, none of the functionality exists yet, but this is nice. We see it right here on top. Ready to go. What's happening? What do submit events do? Yeah, refresh the page. Okay. Ooh, it changed the color scheme a bit when it went to JavaScript React Babel. That's okay. All right, so what do I need to add now? First to my state, what do I need in here? If I'm going to be controlling this form for my app.js. Yeah, the two inputs. So title is empty and description is empty. Now the two methods I need. And change and handle submit with the prevent defaults. Okay, review time. Let's build the hard part, the handle change. Moroni, could you help me out? I would like one set state to be able to update either of these. I'm not. Unless, are we, no, we're not too good. Carlos, you're in the hot seat.
All right, so from the event driven target, well, let me, from the event target, we're going to extract I at point name value.
Nailed it. Okay, and I'm just doing that because I can, so I don't have to say e.target.name, e.target.value. Okay, then how do I update state to have those match?
So we're going to do
This dot set state.
and you're going to pass the there's going to be name, bracket, and square bracket.
Yeah, because without brackets, it's going to try to update a property of state called name, and that doesn't exist. But if we do this, now it's the name of whatever input we're typing in. which is either title or description, and we're going to set it equal to its value. Great. And if I want to test and make sure this works, where do I look? Where do I go? I'm so lost. You're never lost. You have DevTools. So let's go to React DevTools. If you haven't started using these yet, start using these yet. And let's look at our state. Wrong state. What state am I seeing right now? Ooh, now I can see my provider state in here too. That's pretty neat. Okay. So where is my state? Is it this unknown? Doesn't look like it. No. Aha, my app. All right, so I'm going to type title's updating, description's updating, page isn't refreshing. So things are good. Things are good. So now what do we need to do in our handle submit? My bad. To anyone. What do I want to do in my handle submit? Okay, so new to do. And it will have a title. Where am I getting that from? Yeah, e.target.value is saving it in state, but now they've hit the submit button. So state should be fully updated at this point with their data. So you can say make a new to-do object off of all the data they just gave you. Now, can I call this whatever I want? Like the object name here? Yeah, it's a variable. What about the keys? Can I call these whatever I want? What? No, no. Why? Yeah, you haven't seen it yet, but when we write our own databases, we tell it exactly what to expect. You're going to get an object with a dot title. If it's dot something else, like dot headline, reject the object. Don't save it. It doesn't match what we're expecting. Okay, so we have our object, and what would we do next? Cool, so I'll set this up. This one's a freebie. Everyone gets it. Axios.post to the, not the div, to the URL. Aren't I so nice? I'm going to do this for everybody. Dot then, it won't in a moment. Okay, and we're like, cool, we'll console log the error, and the response comes back. What comes back in the response from the post request? What is response.data? Yeah, it's this to do, but it has like the ID and everything added to it. Cool, so it comes back and I want to do what with the response data? Okay, I can do that. We'll console.log response, and for that case, I'll say Axios and Axios. All right, and let's just see if this works. Let's console log the response. Newest to do stuff. And we'll open the console and hit add to do and look at the console, and oh, something bad happened. I wasn't expecting this exactly. What did I do wrong in this post request? I promise you the API would have accepted it if I did it right. What is missing? Notice how new to do is not highlighted. I'm not using this variable. So how do I actually send this in the post request? Yep, so new to do. Okay, I think we got it fixed. Oh, it'll work, but not like we want it to. So we're gonna do buy milk, whole milk, add to do. Yes, we got our to do back. There it is, it worked. However, what do I need to do with this response to make sure it's saved and showed on the page immediately? What do I need to call here so the page re-renders and shows the new to-do? Set state. Well, when I say this dot set state, where do I want to save it in state? Oh crap. Where are my to-dos at? Yeah, but am I maintaining my array of to-dos in this file? No, it's in my global state. Crap. So how do I actually say set state, but not this? I want to save it here.
This props.
We just wrote it in the wrong place. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this out, cut it, watch very closely. We cut it out of the handle submit. We take it to the to-do provider. We say, let's make a method called add to-do. And let's do the request in here. So when we set state, when it comes back, we have access to the place we need to update. So now add to do needs to be provided to my app. So add to do from this.add to do. And then in app.js, I can say this.props.add to do, add my new to do. And it's being sent to that other file. So I'm going to send the new to do to this method in context. It's going to receive it, and then it's going to send it. But now when it comes back, I'm in the file that is maintaining the to-do state, so I can update it immediately and have the UI trigger a change for the user. And I heard someone say it, what do I need to use in set state to make this happen? Prev state. I need to keep all the to-dos that were there and add to them. So I'll update to-dos to be a new array from everything from prev state dot to-dos. And then I want to add my new to-do to the end. So how do I refer to my new to-do in this function? So this new to-do just has a title and description. We want the one that has that and the ID, the one that came back from the database. Response dot data. If it's easier to read, you can say const new or saved to do from database is the response.data, and then we'll add that to the end of the array. Saved to do from DB. Just to show. So this is interesting, right? We put our method in context, but we tell our method to expect a new to-do object when it's called so that we can just provide it to our app. Our app can consume it. Now it can refer to that method as this.props.add_to_do and send it the new to-do from this state. We're sending some local state data to our global state to update our global state. A little tricky. Little tricky. Questions on this process? Is there any questions where you have like, what just happened or why did we do it this way? Yeah, it's like bing bong, bing bong, all over the place. Some music, band practice after class today. A lot of moving parts, yeah. You won't, like I always fear giving out this code because if you're looking at it and you're just, you're building it off my templates, you won't get the flow of logic. You have to approach it from step one and build it yourself using notes when you're absolutely stuck, like, okay, I'm trying to build a form. Because if you just throw everything down to start with, you'll quickly lose how did we get there? And then it's impossible to add to because you don't even know how the code you're using is working, which is very frustrating. So, yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely have this on YouTube so you can follow it. One more time with the order of logic though. I have this state in my app.js that maintains my inputs, right? When I hit submit, we now see it's down here. But what just happened was handle change kept track of state, so this was updated. On submit, we created a to-do object with the data the user gave us, and we sent it to our method in context. Context received it, did the post request to it, right? This placeholder here. It got the new to-do and then it updated our to-dos array. Well, the to-dos array is being provided via the provider to our app component. So this set state triggers a re-render, and it starts off here. It re-renders this, which re-renders this, which is able to then map through the new to-dos from the database, and we just see it automatically show up at the bottom. But we could have easily put both of these methods and this state in the app.js. It would work the exact same, but we'd have that issue with now we have local state and global state mixed together. Everything's in one file. It's getting harder to manage. So arguably, it is harder at first to move over to context, but it makes coding a lot easier once we've practiced it. Don't need that. Should we do the delete and then take a break? The delete will take like 10 minutes, just so we can see this process one more time.
Every time we do a form, I always have this question. Is it a handle change?
Yeah, this beast right here.
I understand the brackets, you know, what is it? What exactly are you updating?
It depends, really. If I'm typing in this input, I'm updating title and state because I'm grabbing the event target's name and updating it to the event target's value, which is whatever we're typing. So that would be updating title to whatever I'm typing there, or if it's
that's making it dynamic.
yeah. So we don't have to write a handle change for.
No matter what input you're on, it's gonna update it from state.
Exactly. I'm gonna.
If you've only got two things, you say you're
Feels good. What a nice looking handle change that is. Okay, delete. And we haven't been breaking this down into components, but if we thought about it, how many components do we have right here in our return statement? All right, we have a form component we'd maybe call to-do form, and we'd pass it all this data as props. And then how many components would we use for mapping our to-dos? Probably 2. I would argue 2 is great to start off with. A to-do list component that receives our to-dos and maps them out, it would do this thing, so we wouldn't have to write this in app anymore. And then instead of mapping out divs, we'd map out a to-do component where we could write all of this, which we'd have to do eventually. We may do later to this. Okay, so delete. Ugh, I need everything to have a button. Where am I going to put that button? Right here, okay. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, so not there. Yeah, it's got to be my map. It's got to be on every single item. So where am I creating this list? Right here. And now they all get deletes. But this one needs to be good for this one. This one needs to be good for this one, and so forth. So what is the piece of data that specifies an individual item in a database? The ID. Okay. So we're going to write a method called delete to do. Where am I going to write this method? You're going to have to do it in the provider because what state do I need to update when the to-do gets deleted? I need to update this array. So the method that's updating this needs to be in this file. So I have get to-dos, add to-do. Now I'll say delete to-do. But what is it going to receive as a parameter? How does it know which one to delete? It's going to receive a to-do ID, which I'll call to-do ID in this case, just to mix things up. Well, this needs to be provided to my app, so where do I need to write this word in this file to get it provided? In the provider value object, the thing that is being provided. So delete to do from this dot delete to do. And right now, just to make sure this works, we're going to console log to do ID. I would definitely not write your delete request until you've tested it, because if you write it wrong, you will delete your entire database without clicking a button. So console log it first, and we'll go from there. All right, so now delete to do is being provided. So in app.js, how do I refer to this method? How could I use it? How am I using get to do's or add to do? This dot props, yep, this dot props. And I'm gonna put it on the delete button. On click equals this dot props dot delete to do. And what does it need to be sent? When I call this, what does it expect to receive? The ID. So I'll say parentheses, and how do I refer to the specific to-dos ID? Yeah, just like we're doing for the key here, we can also use it here. Yes, if you write this and you already have your delete request written, my entire page would have just been deleted, gone forever. Because what does parentheses do to a function? Calls it immediately. No, we want to wait for a click to occur. And actually, let's see this. Let's just open console really quick so we can see that all the IDs that showed up, it was called 5 times in the page load for every to-do. But if we add this anonymous function, now no function is being called until we tell it to. And we click, there's that one's ID. And I need to look at my screen. There we go. There's that one's ID. That one's ID. Okay, so the ID is getting passed to that method appropriately. And we know it's only happening once we click. So now it's safe to build this delete request. So one last one here, axios.delete. What is the URL for a delete request? I'll get us started. /, and how do I get the to-do ID I'm giving it as the endpoint here? $, curly brackets, to-do ID. Then it comes back with a response, or .catch, it comes back with an error. Oh, this hasn't happened in a while. I've been okay with that too. But... Ooh, that was cool. Okay, let's see. We can touch it again. Or .catch comes back with an error. Does anyone remember what this API sends you when you delete something?
In this case,
It's just a message. It says successfully deleted to do. So we can alert that to them, res.data.message. Say, hey, the to-do is successfully deleted, but how do I actually make it update? How do I remove the to-do I deleted from my React state? Because the database doesn't have it anymore, but this array does. It's still in here. All right, so set state. Do I need to know what my previous state was? Yes. We do need to know, because what we have right now is the old array, and we need to loop through it, find the one that was deleted, and return a new array that doesn't include it. So what higher order array method filters down data? Filter. So prev state.todos.filter. And for every to-do, only include that to-do in the new array if the to-do's ID is not equal to the to-do ID we just deleted. And this returns a new array of to-dos that does not include the one that has this ID. Nailed it. And this is what allows for the automatic update. Now we can, I'm not going to delete by beef, but there's our console or our alert right here of res.data.message, successfully deleted record. We hit OK, and it's gone. And Harry Potter, no. Buy milk, whole milk. I don't want to delete any of these. So new one. And go. And go, go, go. Got a whole bunch. So now I can delete, delete, delete. And we're back. So for your projects, I'm going to stop the recording here.